died. You think of what took place in Northern Ireland for decades. The violence began between Catholics and Protestants, but it resulted in thousands of people losing their lives. Notice what this columnist, C.L. Sulzberger, said back in 1976. He said, "It is a dismal truth that probably half or more of the wars now being fought around the world are either openly religious conflicts or involved with religious disputes."
That is true.
Yes, when you look at history, Babylon the Great or false religion has been directly responsible for the deaths of millions of people. But interesting, Jehovah God holds Babylon the Great responsible not just for the deaths that it was directly responsible for, but it holds false religion responsible for even more that they are indirectly responsible for. And why is this? Because Jehovah holds religion responsible for their failure in teaching the truth to its members. For example, you think about the truth of genuine brotherly love, that idea that people should be kind to their neighbors. Notice what Micah chapter 4 and verse 3 teaches us. Look at Micah chapter 4 and verse 3. This is a verse that religions would be teaching its members if they were really teaching that truth about brotherly love. There it says, "And he will certainly render judgment among many peoples, and set matters straight respecting mighty nations far away. And they will have to beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning shears. They will not lift up sword nation against nation, neither will they learn their war anymore." And so clearly, religions of the world have not taught this to their members. And because they failed to do so, the members of all these false religions are constantly being drawn into the conflicts that have been taking place through the centuries. Notice these observations by secular people. This is from the Sun newspaper in Vancouver, Canada. This reporter wrote, "It is a weakness of perhaps all organized religion that the church follows the flag. What war was ever fought in which God wasn't claimed to be on each side?" The magazine India Today, commenting on massacres that took place back in 1947, it came to this conclusion. It says, "Religion has been the banner under which the most hideous crimes have been perpetrated. It unleashes tremendous violence and is a very destructive force." And then finally, in the book Preachers Present Arms, the author made this statement. It said, "In the history of civilizations, two forces have ever been joined together in a dual alliance. They are war and religion. And of all the great world religions, none has been more devoted to war than is Christendom." Yes, religion's failure to teach just that simple truth about the need to love one's neighbor has been resulted in the deaths of millions of people, and Jehovah holds Babylon the Great accountable for that. But there's yet another way that religion's failing to teach the truth makes them blood guilty in our Creator's viewpoint. Notice 1 Timothy chapter 2. First Timothy chapter 2, we're going to read together verses 3 and 4. There it says, "This is fine and acceptable in the sight of our Savior God, whose will is that all sorts of men should be saved and come to an accurate knowledge of the truth." So we learn from this that it's Jehovah's will for people to be saved. He wants them to be saved. But there's a close connection between being saved or salvation and the truth based on Instead, they teach their members teachings such as the Trinity, the immortal soul, hellfire that people will burn for billions of years because of the sins that they committed. These teachings aren't the truth. They're lies, and they dishonor Jehovah God. And so Jehovah holds them accountable for leading their members away from the truth and an opportunity for salvation. Clearly, Babylon the Great is blood guilty. Directly or indirectly, Jehovah holds them accountable for the death of all of the innocent people who've been killed on earth. And so she must answer to Jehovah. Jehovah has judged her as deserving to be destroyed. But the question is, when does Babylon the Great's destruction take place? Has it truly arrived? Jesus gave a prophecy that helps us to answer that question. He gave his disciples a sign. Actually, it's a series of events that they could look for to know when he would be ruling from heaven as king, and to know when he would soon act to destroy false religion. And so this sign would help his disciples appreciate just how close they were to Jesus taking action against false religion. And so you might liken it to be somewhat similar to a road sign. As I was, unfortunately, rushing here this afternoon, I didn't give myself enough time. I knew I needed to get off the Northway at Alton at Route 7. But I knew as that sign got closer, and then when I saw the final sign with the arrow on it, I knew it was time for me to get off that highway. And so likewise, this composite sign that Jesus gave his followers would let them know the time period that they're living in, and to know that he would soon act to destroy false religion. So let's take a look at some of the features of that sign that Jesus left for us, for his disciples to look at. We're going to look at Matthew chapter 24. Together, verse 7. In that verse, Jesus said, "For nation will rise against nation."
Right, you all probably heard this before. I gotta get ready. I gotta get out of here. But I do this every Sunday. I listen up to this.
Did you notice the first thing that Jesus said would take
Where are
place?
we?
He said, "Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom." What would that be?
Now you're out of your way.
Well, we won't look at it, but in a parallel prophecy in Revelation chapter 6 and verse 4, the Apostle John predicted that peace would be taken away from the earth. And so you think about what took place in World War II. That war waged on between 1914 and 1918. It's estimated that it killed 10 million soldiers and wounded 21 million others. There were 28 countries that were directly involved in that conflict. But when you take into account lands that were dependent on those countries, almost 90% of the world's population was involved in that global war. Yes, that was truly war on an unprecedented scale. 21 years later, World War II came about, and again, much of the world was involved in that conflict, and it resulted in more than 50 million people being killed. Certainly, wars have not stopped, have they? We see right into our day this great bloodshed. So we see this feature of the sign definitely taking place. In that verse we read, verse 7, Jesus also said that there would be food shortages. So again, we see despite the agricultural technology, despite man's ability to quickly transport food around the world, around 1/5 of the Earth's population doesn't have enough food to eat. Again, we see that feature of the sign taking place as well. Jesus also wrote about earthquakes taking place in one place after another. According to a U.S. Geological Survey, it said the number of earthquakes powerful enough to destroy buildings has averaged 17 a year since 1990 alone. It said on average, earthquakes strong enough to cause almost total destructions of buildings have occurred once each year. And then this other quote said earthquakes have claimed hundreds of thousands of lives in the last 100 years. We don't even have to go back Japan, 80, the earthquake was 2004 that caused that great tsunami that killed like 250,000 people. Again, we see that feature of the sign taking place right in our day. In Luke's account of that sign, he also included that Jesus said that there would be pestilences in one place after another. And again, we see despite man's advances in the medical field, cancer, cardiovascular disease, AIDS, malaria continues to kill millions of people each and every year. We don't have time this afternoon to go into all the other features of the signs, but it includes other events that we've seen taking place. Apostle Paul even talked about attitudes that would be prevalent in people. And we see this sign really taking place in our time, and it indicates that Babylon's time is near. Jesus will soon act to destroy false religion. So far we've identified who Babylon the Great is to the world empire of false religion. We've seen how Jehovah views false religion. He considers them directly or indirectly responsible for all of the innocent lives that have been lost on the earth. And we've seen that Babylon's judgment hour is near. So the important question for us to consider is, how should this information affect us today? Well, clearly, if we are still part of or connected to Babylon the Great, we need to get out of her. We need to cut all ties and stay away from false religion. And it's that great blood guilt that we talked about that makes it so critical to do so. There is a provision of God's law that helps us to appreciate the need for us to flee from false religion and stay away. When you look at Jehovah's law to the nation of Israel, life was always valuable to Jehovah. There was an accountability when a life was taken, even accidentally. In fact, if somebody was killed, the closest family member had the right or the responsibility to take the life of the person or that manslayer. So even if somebody accidentally took a life, there was a price to be paid. That individual, the value of that life was still important to Jehovah God. But he gave the nation of Israel a provision that could preserve the life of somebody who unintentionally took someone else's life. Notice in Numbers chapter 35. Numbers chapter 35, we're going to take a look at verses 11 and 12. It says, and you must choose cities convenient for yourself. As cities of refuge they will serve for you, and the manslayer must flee there who fatally strikes the skull unintentionally. And the cities must serve you as a refuge from the blood avenger, that the manslayer may not die until he stands before the assembly for judgment. So Jehovah God made this provision that of all the Levite cities, there would be 6 cities that would serve as cities of refuge. And so an individual who, by accident,
All right, we're up on 15 minutes. I have to close this one out.
needed to flee to that city to be protected.
Good night.
Why the avenger of blood had the right responsibility to take that individual's life. If that person truly had a